Welcome to the Penn State Wrestling Show. Thomas Frank Carr here with you. Greg Pickel, the star of today's show, bringing you the latest in Penn State wrestling news as the team gets ready for the 2024-2025 season. Just around the corner, but that doesn't prevent some of the wrestlers from going out and doing other stuff and getting, I wouldn't say final tune-ups, but more of those things to get you ready for the upcoming season and to get fans excited about the upcoming season. So, Greg, welcome to the show. What are we talking about today?
Well, T. Frank, the new rankings have come out across college wrestling in the preseason, so we're going to cover some of those a little bit later in the show, but it's U23 World Championships week, so I don't want to say it's the final time we'll talk about freestyle wrestling this year because some other events could pop up. Like I'm sure we'll talk about David Taylor when he goes to Worlds later in the year at the senior level. But U23 Worlds are here, and Penn State has Mitchell Mesenbrink, the second-year Nittany Lion, who came to Penn State via the transfer portal last year and finished second at NCAA's at 165 pounds at this U23 World Championship event. So he'll be one to watch. Depending on when you're listening to this, show comes out Thursday night. Wrestling starts in, I believe they're in Albania Friday morning, very early on the East Coast. So we'll have some updates throughout the day over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com on Friday. The finals are on Saturday. It's not quite the same thing. If he does make it that far, it would not quite be the precursor to Penn State, Wisconsin football that like ESPN College Game Day or Fox Big Noon Kickoff pregame shows could be.
Yeah.
But if the time lines up, I think he'd be wrestling, during your pregame of whatever choice for the Penn State, Wisconsin football game. So stay tuned for updates on that. But it's a good test for him heading to this international event, and he is the only Penn State guy there this time around at the U23 World Championships.
So what are you expecting, I guess? And I know that a lot of this is international. A lot of these guys are relatively unknown from countries that we don't cover. But what are you expecting from Messenbrink in this particular situation?
Yeah, so he obviously, just like at the college level, which is folk style wrestling, of course, he is very prominent in the freestyle scene, very accomplished. He comes into this tournament last year. He won the 2023 U20 World Championship, so obviously going up in age group as you might expect. He was also a two-time U20 World finalist before getting to the U23 age group. So I think he would have, if there were betting odds, he would either be the second favorite or the first favorite, probably the first favorite, considering how, if everyone remembers back during the Olympics, the U.S. guys in the U.S. betting markets were unsurprisingly pretty heavily favored, even though not all of them made it to the finals or won the gold medal. But I think with Messenbrink, this story is a little bit different. There's not... he would be considered one of the, if not the top guy in this bracket. I know FloWrestling had a preview and they expect him to win gold. And, again, these international events, you're not always 100% sure who has showed up and what they've been doing. It takes a little bit of legwork. But largely, the other top contender is on the other side of the bracket from him. I wish I pronounced this right. It's Azerbaijan is where he's from.
Yes.
He's on the other side of the bracket. That appears to be, a likely finals matchup. But one thing that's really interesting to me about his bracket draw, T. Frank, is that two potential other top contenders, one from Iran and the other from Japan, are meeting in a qualifying round matchup, or as we know here in the U.S. would be considered a pigtail matchup. And Mitchell Mesenbrink buyed his way into the first round and would not face the winner of that match should they win then their first round match until the quarterfinal potentially. He would have to win his first round match too, of course. But I would say just on paper, the draw for Mitchell Mesenbrink is really good. And obviously we saw it last year, and Penn State fans know this, that he's really good, and it doesn't matter which discipline he's wrestling in. The word is always aggression, pursuit, score points, go for it, see what happens. And that tends to work out pretty well on the international stage. So I think a good test is on tap for him here, and whether or not, he wins gold at the U23 World Championships. He opens his tournament with a wrestler from Kazakhstan who was a 2023 silver medalist at the senior level, who now, of course, drops back into this age group. That'll be a test coming out of the gate. But I would say, by and large, it would not be a shock to see Messenbrink roll into the finals pretty easily, and then we'll see what would happen from there.
So is this a chance for you to see what to expect from Messenbrink in the upcoming season? And how excited / fortunate should Penn State fans feel that Messenbrink is a Nittany Lion, given where, his story so far and how much he's burst onto the scene last year?
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I think if you go back through previous episodes of the show here on the YouTube page at Blue White Illustrated, we talked when he first said he was accepting this spot as the former U20 World Champion in 2023. That gave him the opportunity to take this spot on Team USA for the 2024 U23 World Championships. And that was important at the time because at that point, back in the summer, T. Frank, we did not know what weight Messenbrink was going to go. Was he going to drop down to 157? Was he going to stay at 165? And by entering the 74 kilogram bracket here, taking that spot on the team, that's 163 pounds to us. That confirmed that he was going to stay up at 165. So that was the first thing that kind of set the lay of the land for Penn State in terms of one potential lineup question. We'll get to some other ones here in a bit. But that was one important factor for the college wrestling season. And then from the international season, it was just another reminder of how much he likes to compete and what he thinks he can do at the international level once his college days are over, which those are not over anytime soon, of course. But, a lot of guys, this is another step on their journey to when they're done striving for NCAA championships. They look back on these earlier U20, U23 freestyle experiences when they get ready to go up to the senior level, which, of course, Mitchell Mesenbrink will have the chance to, in the future. So, yeah, excited to see him perform. I think it's a weird conversation because it's all about competing. It's all about being the best you can be internationally and nationally. I would have there's a little bit of a thought in the back of your mind thinking, okay, is it a great idea to go out and compete in an international tournament with the season less than a month away?
I'm glad you said that. I thought that, but I know that I'm largely ignorant. So I'm glad you also had that thought.
No, so it's a good talking point because this comes up almost every year in one way, shape, or form, whether it's the senior level, whether it's Olympic trials, whether it's U23, etc. So it's actually pretty common in the sport. Because, I did want to address that. I should have threw it in the rundown, but forgot. But as I was rambling, it came to mind. But, yeah, like you wouldn't see this in almost any other sport, but this is fairly common for guys to do this. He's not the first Penn State guy to compete in an international event very close to the start of the college season. So, yeah, I think that's probably always in your back of your mind, but that's just kind of the way it goes. So I wouldn't overthink. If you're listening to this and find yourself overthinking that idea, I would not. It just is the way this sport operates. And, it's a longer and larger conversation about how college wrestling is scheduled and how international wrestling is scheduled. And obviously a lot of countries do not have college wrestling. So this is more of a U.S. and the world problem, so to speak, just in terms of how the schedule all aligns. But yeah, this is pretty common for guys to do this. So don't overthink that part of it. But I do think that you heard rumblings of it. But, I do wonder at some point in the future if there isn't a conversation about changing the college wrestling schedule to maybe better align with the international schedule, but college wrestling is going to have its own issues to deal with. We're getting way far afield here, but its own issues to deal with, with the House versus NCAA settlement and what does that mean for non-revenue sports, so on and so forth. So I don't think it'll mean anything to Penn State wrestling, but certainly college wrestling overall will have plenty to grapple with on that front too. So anyway, just to wrap up Mitchell Mesenbrink, like I said, competing very early in the morning on Friday and presumably on Saturday. We'll have coverage of that at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But yeah, I think it's fair to call him the favorite going into this 74 kilogram bracket. And certainly he has the past experience and success to put himself on the top podium again.
So let's get into the latest college wrestling rankings, which is the next thing on the list and something else to get fans excited about the upcoming season. So take us through the latest breakdown of who ranks where at each weight.
Yeah, so I don't want to do one of those shows where I just read off line by line by line.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump around a little bit, like as most listeners and viewers can assume. Like everyone has Greg Kirkfleet number one at heavyweight. One interesting note was that Matt Scouts did have Carter Starachi at number two behind returning 184-pound NCAA champ Parker Kakaisen at number one for the preseason rankings, but as Willie noted in his breakdown, he could change his mind on that. Probably, I think he said, ask me tomorrow and I could change my mind, but that could probably be an every hour conversation. Another obvious one, T. Frank, Bo Bartlett is number three at 141 across the board. Andrew Alvarez from Northern Colorado returns from an Olympic red shirt, and Jesse Mendez from Ohio State, who beat Bo in the final last year, is back. So those guys are 1 and 2, with everyone having Bartlett at 3. But what I would say is this: at 125, the main takeaway is that no Flo and Intermat did not list Luke Liljedahl there yet. Matt Scouts did, putting him at number 3 at 125, despite the fact he has not competed in a college wrestling match yet. But another indication, of course, as we've talked about here in previous shows, that he is almost certainly going to win that 125-pound job. And you tie that together with the fact that at 133, you look at the rankings, I believe, everyone had him ranked Flo at number 10. Matt Scouts has him making the blood round, and Intermat puts him at number 11, which would have him in the blood round and out of the All-American picture, but still having a decent run at nationals as well, with a chance to maybe work his way into that top 8. So,
question for you here.
Yeah, go ahead.
What are your expectations for Luke Liljedahl?
Well, they're just enormous at this point, right? I mean, we're almost getting to the point where there's too much pressure and expectation put on this kid. But when you look at sort of the not up and down, but I think last year we talked a lot about 125 being pretty wide open, and I think it finds itself in a similar situation again, which is not uncommon. Again, you get a lot of younger guys, freshmen, redshirt freshmen, etc., wrestling there that don't necessarily have a ton of experience at the college level, no matter how long they've been in college. That's not the case for every one of them, of course, but a lot of them do tend to find themselves in that boat. So, yeah, I do think the expectations are becoming, extremely high at this point, and there's some very accomplished wrestlers back. If he does end up taking that spot, he's going to see Jor Volk from Wyoming, an extremely talented wrestler, at some point during the season. Of course, Wyoming comes to Penn State in December, so you would expect it to be there. If not, maybe somewhere else down the road. But that's a big thing we talked about previously about watching for with this Penn State schedule when the Cowboys come to town in December. Matt Ramos is back. Richie Figueroa, Arizona State's very good. So you don't want to go too far with this, because it felt like we're at the point of where we were with Braden Davis going into Big Tens last year already with Luke Liljedahl. And that Luke Liljedahl accomplished so much already that it's fair. But I just hate putting too high of expectations on first-year guys. But if there's someone that can come in and win a national title as a true freshman, it would be Luke Liljedahl for sure.
Gotcha. What else stands out about the rankings and maybe some of the areas where Penn State has some decisions to make or some situations to work through before the season or even during the early non-conference season?
Yeah. So what these rankings tell me is what they told me, or we've told you before, is that Shane Van Ness is coming back, the 2023 All-American who was hurt early last year. He's number 2 at 149 across the board behind Virginia Tech's Caleb Henson. So good to see more confirmation that whatever injury he suffered lower body early last season is going to allow him to be ready to go early in this season. Tyler Kasak, last year's replacement for Van Ness and All-American third-place finisher at 149. He's bumping up to 157. Everyone has him in the top 5. 3, 4, and 5 are covered across the 3 sites, so we'll just go with top 5 for him. But he's gonna remain in the lineup as far as we know. I know there was a lot of talk about Alex Facundo certifying at 157, and we'll see if that plays out throughout the year or not. My initial assumption would be that if all 3 ranking services and sites put KSAC not just on the rankings but in the top 5, probably tells you how that one's going to go, but we'll wait and see. We covered, 174 Levi Haynes is behind Keegan O'Toole. He's bumping up 2 weight classes, of course, after winning 157 last year. So Missouri's Keegan O'Toole, they'll face off hopefully at the collegiate wrestling class duels in December down in Nashville. So we covered the other guys, and that brings us to 197, which is the lone kind of remaining question mark, true question mark in the lineup. Like I said, 157, we'll see. 125, we think we know what's going on. Same with 133, but 197 is and you know this well from going to Cale Sanderson's news conferences every week, especially early in the year, but to the endless questions of fans and to media about who's your guy at this weight, who's your guy at that weight. They will let these battles play out as long as they need to, both in the room and on the mat. And 197 is the spot where I think they're going to give Lucas Cochran, Josh Barr, and even possibly Mirasola a chance to compete in some of those early season dual meet matches to see who ultimately wins that job. So Flo has Lucas Cochran, who's a returner, at number 20. Intermet has Josh Barr at number 23. And so, it's just at this point, I would assume it's going to be one of those 2 guys. Mirasola probably redshirts, the extremely talented 4-time state champ from Wisconsin coming in at this class. So I think it's either Cochran or Barr there, but Cale Sanderson, as we well know, and Cody Sanderson and Casey Cunningham, and now Nick Lee and his staff will do whatever they have to do to have their best lineup on the mat come the postseason, come Big Tens, and come the NCAA tournament. So ultimately, I think that, it comes down to Cochran or Barr. I could make a case for either one of them to win this job, and I just don't feel like it's a necessary task, because at the end of the day, they'll decide it in the room and throughout those early dual matches, and however many of them they need, if it's the full November and December slate, or if it bleeds into the Big Ten season, which starts in January. They'll get the right answer eventually. It may not
to
come
be
as
honest
fast
with you,
as
Greg,
everyone wants. Yeah.
To be honest with you, I think that even if it is decided, they won't let us know until the very last moment to maintain that vaunted competitive advantage heading into the Big Ten season, because you've seen any advantage that a head coach or a coaching staff or a program can gain from obscuring some of this information on the college level, they will absolutely take that. Not that Penn State necessarily needs it, but that's why they are who they are, is because they look for all of those edges, advantages, and try to win in every single one of these situations. That'll do it for today's show. As always, please, if you are watching this video, please like the video, subscribe to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. We'll be back next week with more information, more conversation, and more previews of Penn State wrestling here from Blue White Illustrated.